Welcome to the Alchemy of Business Show with your host, Steve Rodgers. The Alchemy of Business Show is a podcast that mixes practical, actionable business solutions with soulful insights for anyone seeking deeper meaning in their lives and greater success in their work. Steve will be featuring purpose-driven leaders from all walks of life and getting insight into their journeys from failures to triumphs. So tune in to transition, transform, and evolve in every dimension of your business and life. And now your host of the Alchemy of Business Show, Steve Rodgers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alchemy of Business. Thanks for joining in, whether you're listening on iTunes or some other audio format. Maybe you're watching this on video and you're on E360 TV or YouTube. However you got here, I am just glad you are here. And today, as always on the Alchemy of Business, we are talking about wiser decisions, greater profits in your life in abundance in all areas, and higher purpose. And no better guest to have on today about higher purpose than my friend, Mr. Dave Clare, who I'm going to introduce you to in just a minute. But Dave is a phenomenal man, businessman, father, husband, friend. But I met him about 3 years ago now in Australia. So he's coming to us from halfway across the world, and it's actually his next day already. So he's already into his Thursday. We're actually doing this on my Wednesday. But Dave is a phenomenal guy. I knew when I met him, not only was he a keynote speaker at a conference that I attended, but he was also the MC for the overall event. So he just kept things flowing. His style as to who he is and his calmness, but yet his humor and his bright personality just shone through. And there was no wonder that when I started talking to him, I realized, well, of course, he is the CEO and founder of a company called Circle Leadership, where he's helping other leaders and entrepreneurs really create more generations of other leaders. And he is a real practical, hands-on entrepreneur who's not only been building businesses themselves, but he's helping other business owners to do this in all different segments of businesses. He is an international keynote speaker. He is an author, and he's really an authority on really how to become a purpose-driven leader and entrepreneur, which I love because that is a big part of what I do at Alchemy. He is a self-proclaimed prophet for purpose, and profit is the word P-R-O-P-H-E-T, for purpose, but also for profit. Of course, you've got to make profit, but he is self-proclaimed as the prophet for purpose. And he has been a trained facilitator, self-taught and taught by going to many different facilitator trainings. And then also his on-hand practical use of that globally, where he's helped facilitate all kinds of programs. He also has another book coming out that we'll be talking about soon. So let's quit talking about him and talk with him. So let's bring on Mr. Dave Clare.
G'day from down under, Steve.
Hey there. Good day. How are you there, Mr. Dave?
Yeah, good. And I'm coming to you from the future.
You are, and I love that. And I knew you were a futuristic guy when I first met you, but literally every time we talk, you are coming to me from the future. So
Yes.
how is everybody doing down under? How are you, and how is the world of, and are you in Perth?
Yeah, Perth, West Australia. Yes.
Yeah, so the big C word is part of a conversation for people, but I'm hoping that, from what I understand from our talking earlier, I know your family and stuff are good, but how is the world down under? We're in the world up here in the US, and we definitely have our challenges of the global world, but how are you guys doing down in Australia in general?
Yeah, it's firstly, the big C word is Canadian or COVID. So the Canadian living in West Australia, it's, you know what, I was saying, it's an interesting thing here in West Australia. It's a little bit different to the rest of the country because we're kind of like we're the most isolated. Well, Perth is the most isolated city in the world before any of this isolation concept actually came around. So we're fairly isolated anyway. We've been living in a bit of a bubble here in West Australia for a long time, whereas the rest of the country has been going through pretty much what you would see anywhere else in the world, in Canada, in US, UK, everything like that. And we're still mandated in a bunch of many ways. But West Australia now has been, it's at the stage now where we're opening up again and we're preparing for what everyone else has already been dealing with.
Right.
Now, we're a much smaller, I mean, if you look at West Australia, it's 1/3 of the country. For those people don't understand Australia, by the way, it's the same size as the continental USA. So West Australia, for all the people from the United States who are listening to this, where you're located, Steve, can you imagine what 1/3 of the United States, how many states are in 1/3 of like the western 1/3 of the United States?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's WA. Like we are 1/3 of the country, and that's how isolated we are. And we have one major city called Perth.
Well, it is there. And what was the reason you chose to live in Perth? How did you end up there, even way before the C word? How did you
Yeah,
end up on that part of the planet when we're putting a dot where Mr. Dave Clare is? How did you end up there?
yeah. That very simple answer. My mom and dad moved here in 1981 when we were all three of us boys were fairly young. So I was, I think it was 15 or almost 16. My younger brother was 9, and my older brother was 17. So and they've been here ever since. Now, you may remember I've traveled around a bit, and I've lived in Papua New Guinea, in Australia twice, in Canada twice. And so born Canadian, moved here, went to New Guinea, came back here, back to Canada, I've been back here, and came back to Perth again because this is where my family was.
Awesome. Well, I know that you love living there, so I'm glad that you guys are maneuvering through the C COVID coronavirus stuff. But I knew that you would personally, or even as a country, but I knew you personally would, because you are a resilient, move through no matter what, make life positive, no matter what, and that's part of what you teach. That's part of what you train. So. You know, you and I have talked about this before. You know, the COVID or the C word of the world comes in our lives and our businesses in various different ways at various different times.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not as obvious as a global pandemic that everyone's experiencing it. But how did you get on this path, Dave, of knowing that your inner, always seeing brighter side of things and also looking for higher purpose? How did that not only just become an inner working for you as to how you think and live your life, but how did it become a business?
How to become a business? That's an awesome question. So firstly, I want to just share one simple thing, like from anyone dealing with this, the way I've dealt with. I'm a human being, right? A spiritual human being myself. And when this stuff all happened, and this stuff will happen, let's say pandemic wise, but there'll always be some disruption now that I think that's going to come along, which is why I do the work that I do, which is really cool. But it's easy to go into victim mode, and I've felt myself go into victim mode, like, oh, why is this happening to us now? We just got the new, we just had really some momentum going with clients, and like, what's, and then it's like, oh, hang on a second, Dave, is this happening to you or is it happening for you? And so went from victim mode to victor mode. And like, that's the resilience. The resilience is how long you stay in victim mode.
Right.
And because of my resilience, my strength, like I was like, oh, you know what, Dave, you've been through things, not maybe this grand scale before, but you know what to do and how to, sometimes react, but ideally respond to these sorts of things and do something with it. And so I put opportunity in the board and so reimagined the way we would serve clients going forward into the world. But so that's that take on that. But if I go back to how did I do this work, I've considered myself a slow learner, Steve. Like what this whole purpose concept for me, I always knew innately, you get that feeling that there's something more to my life. There must be some reason why I'm here, and there's something I'm supposed to do with my life. But it took me a long time to work out what it was. But what I did, and this starts to lead to how I help other leaders reconnect with their purpose. Because firstly, I believe you don't need to create a purpose. It already exists. You might need to uncover it or discover it because it's just been buried or hidden for a long time. But I believe it's in there. And then what I did is I made a list of all the things. When I looked at the people that I love working with and serving and stuff like that, I made a list of what are all the problems that they had that I was really helping with, and what was I most passionate about. And when I kind of summarized those two lists and looked at where they collided, and then this is where I believe your purpose lies, at the crossroads of your passion and their problem, where those two things collide, that's where your purpose lives. So I wrote down this thing, when I helped, it was one of my first clients, Tim Gleason in Canada, help him really crystallize why he started his business in the first place. And we saw his whole mindset shift in terms of like, this is why we do business. And I remember it was, they were a third-party logistics company, and it was to create the smartest distance between 2 points for when they were doing their stuff. And then when he reconnected to that, and then he was able to connect his team to that, like the business just went crazy. And I'm like, I look back at all the other people where I'd done that with Dr. Steve Rodgers and, Saving Lives Ahead of Time, and all these people helping them really connect not only to the purpose, but become the prophet, the inspired teacher, leader of their cause or their calling. That's when I said, if I can help people become the prophet of their purpose, they will profit from their purpose. And that's how that all started.
Well, and I love that. And I know I want to come back on the next segment we talk about and go from that. And then you go into, you dig down further on that and about, I mean, we've heard about mission statements for a long time, but you really dig deep on it in a different kind of flavor, and like the why of, instead of just what is your why, you get into the why of why have your why and why you need a mission. So I want to come back and talk about that, but I want to go back before we end this segment and talk a little bit about your victim mode to being the victor.
Yes.
You and I have chatted about that before, and I've done various reading on that. And I believe that, it's kind of that glass half full, half empty concept, but it's also this way people live their life, whether it's a person, a family, a community, a society, or even a country. Sometimes this mode of victim versus victor. When did you first start becoming aware of that concept? And what did you do to start making yourself aware that you were in it? And then do you have any skills or techniques that you snap yourself out of it sooner than later than in your early days?
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, for me, it took somebody else to help me to identify with that. So I actually, a good friend of mine, Stephen, here in Australia, he did a whole life timeline, and he just looked back at all the things that happened to me and asked me when most significant moments were. And then he started to show me a pattern where, things would happen, and then, I would take this long to deal with it, and then I would actually find a way to, react or respond. I think there's a difference between reacting and responding to something. Reacting is the thing, and responding is saying, hey, this has happened. Let me think about it. How do I interpret it? And then what I'm going to do with it. And when I learned to move from react to respond mode, and he said, look, and he's pointed out, like, here, this happened to you, you reacted, this happened to you, you reacted, this happened to you. Now, you've always demonstrated your ability to bounce back. But he said, when are you going to learn to respond to things and be more proactive in situations? And that was really important for me. It's like I just mapped out all those moments in my life. I'm like, holy crap, you're right. Like when that happened. And like I reacted. And then once I could actually see it. It's almost like I had to take it from the inside and put it back out on a wall where I go, holy crap, that's it. Like, look at that. I was able to look at that. And then so now it's for me it's almost like I feel it now. Like, as I said, I'm a human being. So it doesn't mean I won't go into victim mode, but it's how long I stay there. And it's how long does it take me now to notice that, oh my God, I'm thinking like this is happening to me, not for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where, like, for me, I wrote opportunity on my whiteboard. I have a picture of it up on one of my socials somewhere. And I just said, what's the opportunity here? And I wrote all this sort of stuff down around it. And that for me is when I look at, if you're a victim, then why is this happening to me rather than why is this happening for me? And that's the simplest way I can look at it for people. So if you just wrote, why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me, what would you come up with?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I love that. And we're going to come back. We've got about 1 minute left on the segment. We're going to come back and dig further in that, but we're also going to dig in when you change that shift, that shifting, someone else got you aware of that. You took that in and you said, okay, this is a shift that I have to make. And then I love that you said, how quickly can I get to that? Because I think about people that are in certain skills. I mean, the Olympics just ended. You look at people that are artful in their skills about certain things. And sometimes when you understand something, and then it's either how to get more swiftly to that, whether it's to earn profit more quickly, whether it's to keep your employees engaged more rapidly, whether it's to learn from your mistakes more rapidly. And I think once you're that awareness, I love that there's also the awareness of the timing. How quickly or how deeply can I do something? So I want to come back and talk a little bit more about that. And then how does that also tie into why is it your approach of why you need a mission is different than having a mission statement? Awesome. And should people have a mission statement personally and professionally? So I want to come back and talk with Dave Clare about mission and this concept about mission. So we'll be right back. Thank you for listening into the Alchemy of Business. We will be back in about 1 minute, everybody. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business Show. We've been talking with Mr. Dave Clare down under in Perth, Australia. We were heavily getting into his purpose-driven leadership and how he turned that from just a mission and a calling into an actual business. And we started digging further into this concept of victim from victor, and then that leading into even more understanding how quickly to get to some behavior changes. So Dave, on that same vein, I know you go into companies. I've seen you sit with in boardrooms of companies and teams. I know you do stuff individually with people. So this victim to victor concept does work individually and within companies, I'm assuming. And I want to tie that right into this conversation about mission. Do you see the importance of someone having mission somehow parallel, different, or adverse or aligned with this mission thing that you also teach? So I want to talk about those two things merging together into one.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And this is really awesome because for me, this is something I'm really passionate about as well, is the fact that most of what like the mission statements that we've seen in the past, like they're 25 years of this big mission statement up on a plaque up on the wall in the office, and it's like this long, very long-winded thing about our mission. and whether I just don't think that style of mission is serving us in the world today. Whether I agree that was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I just don't think it's serving us today. Our belief about mission, I think, needs to shift. And if you go back and let's get into, say, even military terms, if I've completed my mission, what's after that, Steve?
Well, we talked about vision, we talked about mission, and then you go into the practicality of implementation.
Yeah, but if you look at from mission, like in military terms, if I've completed the mission, what's after that mission?
Another mission.
Another mission. And then what's after that mission? Another mission.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Keep going. You're never done with missions as long as you're on that. You're in that.
Missions are all hopefully adding up to create a world that you see, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where, I look at purpose is why we get out of bed every morning. It's what engages us and everything like that. This is, beyond making money and, I have a real sense of meaning to the work that I'm doing. That's what my purpose is to me. So I know why I'm coming to work. And then vision is what the world looks like when we've been living that purpose through our values for 10, 20, 30 years. But mission then is who do we need to become as a business to start creating that world that we see? And then what I work with people on is in terms of just a 3-year mission. So to me, your mission statement is who does your organization need to become in the next 3 years to start creating the world that you see? Because once we become that, then who do we need to become next? And who do we need to become next? And who do we need to become next? Because if you look at the world today, and I challenge business owners, leaders, even yourself as an individual, if you go back 3 years ago, I'm just going to go back this way on screen. So if you go back 3 years ago, is your organization 3 years ago the same as it is today? Like, Steve, is your business or your organization?
No, it's not. I mean, there's definitely similarities, but it's definitely evolved and changed, I hope. And there's many different nuances that I've learned or incorporated. So it's not the same.
Yeah. And then if you look at your organization today, is it going to be the same as it is today in the next 3 years?
Yeah. And not. Yeah.
No, because business is a series of evolution. So our mission then should be what evolves us as an organization. Right. So whilst our purpose shouldn't change once it's very clearly and defined, and, we've got that really at the heart of who we are and our values and things like that, vision is so far out anyway. So the one moving piece in our business is our mission. So when you're writing your mission statement as a business, it should be who does our business need to become? And I believe then that your mission then dictates what your strategy should be. Our strategy should be how we become that business. Right? Which is then us living our purpose through the lens of our values to become this organization to create that world that we see. So we create this sudden total alignment. Now, you also asked about from a personal point of view. So for me, as I look at the mission of Circle Leadership, for example, our organization, in the next 3 years, we need to become a global community of evolving purpose-driven leaders. Right? Which is why we now serve clients in Canada, UK, New Zealand. We're expanding. And we're moving into a group format because it tells us there's so much talent and ability in our client base that we're not helping the clients help the clients kind of a thing. So we want to create this global community. We must become a global community. So then me as the leader, I go, hey, Dave, this is you, and you built Circle Leadership to here. Now you're saying Circle Leadership to people listening to this. So if I'm the leader I am today and I built the business I have today, then I've identified the business I want to have in 3 years. Well, the leader I am today built the one I have today, not the one that I want to build. So who do I need to become? What's my mission then as a leader to build the business that I need to have to stay relevant in the hearts and minds of people I choose to serve?
Yeah, and your traits, your characteristics, your habits, the way you show up, what you're modeling, etc. Correct?
Yeah, 100%. So what we look at is so over those 3 years, then what I set for myself, and I've been doing this for many years now, is the theme for myself for this year. What's the theme of my evolution this year? And then I look at that, and once I realize who do I need to become this year? And every year I've had a theme, all right? And then I look at that theme across all areas of my life. So I have one focal point, like I need to become this. And then what does that look like as a leader, as a husband, as a father, as a spiritual person, my health, my wealth, my well-being? How does that impact all those areas of my life? And that's how I evolve myself. That becomes my mission, then, is to become that. Because I know if I become that, then I advance the organization. The organization will never become what it's capable of if I don't. My team won't either, because if I don't increase my own capabilities and capacity for greatness, I won't create space for the team. And what we do is we keep the ceiling where people can't go any further because I'm not going any further. And then I lose great people and they leave because there's no space or capacity for the greatness.
Right.
Because
that is so I love that. And it works in all types of companies. I don't care if you're a tech company, a healthcare company, a construction company, a Subway shop. I mean, that concept, that teaching is universal. And like you brought it down to the humanity of each person.
Yeah.
And in your first book, Simplified, I think you covered some of these concepts. So
Yes.
for those of you that haven't read Dave's stuff, I think it was the first book, right? Simplified.
Yes.
So if you're on Amazon, if you're listening in, you can buzz and get his book there. But Simplified, I think you were trying to take some of these sometimes overwhelming, sometimes people look at them as airy fairy type topics and bring them down into not just this topic, but also simplifying the stuff that needs to be done to create the life or business that you want. And we are going to talk a little bit further also about your practicality of your toolbox, but I want to come back first and talk about Simplified and how did that book start, and are some of these concepts in that book?
Yeah, 100%. Well, you know me, Steve, I'm a pragmatic spiritualist, and we've talked about
I
this
love
before.
that. Say that again. You are a pragmatic spiritualist. Tell us what
Yes.
that means to you first, and I'll go
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Simplified.
totally. So I'm a spiritual human being like that, but for me, there's and there's no right or wrong to this. There's people who are just very pragmatic. They're just very practical about life, and there's people who are extremely spiritual. And I guess I keep one foot in each camp. I want to help the let's say the pragmatic people understand a bit more of spiritual context to the stuff they do, and the spiritual people understand how to turn that into something that's simple for people to understand and be able to go, okay, I get that. Because, it's like I've always said, I have my feet on the ground and my head in the clouds.
Yeah.
And so I'm somewhat grounded, but in that sense. So as a pragmatic spiritualist, that's how I describe it.
Yeah, I love that.
I love spirituality, but how do I put that into some practical application in my life?
Yes.
Right? So that's
and that's exactly. I loved that stuff, and that's in alchemy. What I've been also on a mission to do, and I brought in the concept of really for myself and talking about spiritual intelligence of how do you take the spiritual concept in an intelligent way and create wisdom and then practical steps. So let's go back to you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but talking on, you've got this slide up here that my engineer Noel just threw up. That is IQ, SQ, spiritual intelligence, and EQ, emotional intelligence, which is part of what Iggy was about, my book, Iggy Principles. But your books, your writings, and your teachings, you've been doing this for a while. So I'm digressing because I was going to talk to you about Simplified, but let's go here and then let's bounce back and forth like you and I do, because this slide is so cool. I can't not. For those of you that aren't seeing this slide, if you're on audio, it's somebody's brain sideways, like a side of a drawing of someone's head. And at the top, it says SQ for spiritual intelligence. And then in front of them is EQ for emotional intelligence. And then right behind them is another IQ for intelligence. But it's basically saying the left brain, the right brain, and the whole brain. So this slide here, Dave, that we're looking at, and some people might see that, tell me about this slide and how do you use this and what does this mean to you?
Well, yeah, when you talk about so for me, the spiritual intelligence using the whole brain, like to me, that's what I talk about is like you have your normal brain, but your heart brain as well. And so there's the intelligent brain and there's the heart brain, which to me is your emotional intelligence, and then your intellect, which is the logic brain. So you have your logic and your heart. And if you can work those two things together, I believe based on what your diagram there, look at me, that's how I'm simply interpreting it, going, well, my spiritual intelligence is when my heart and my head are in alignment. Right. Yeah. And everything's working in sync. Like it's like you got there synchronous. I didn't even see that synchronous processing of the whole brain. So, yeah. So when my heart and my head are in sync, and even my gut, if I want to bring that up, that everything just works in harmony. That's when my spiritual quotient is at its highest. And this is for me, when I want to serve our clients and I want to serve anyone in my life, is like when everything's in total alignment of my head, my heart, and my gut, then that's when I'm at my best to serve people. When I'm serving just from my head space, like that can be okay. When I'm serving just from the heart space, that can be okay too. But when both of them work together, and then my gut as well, like there's like total harmony of my whole being, then yeah, I think to me like that's when we can be at our best.
Right.
That's
exactly.
what I'm looking at.
I agree with that. Well, and I think part of the way people do that is you've got this diagram behind. Well, first, before I digress again, let's talk about Simplified. In your book, Simplified, this is where you started implementing some of these principles, is correct. And then in the next segment, we're going to talk about your upcoming book. But tell everyone quickly about Simplified. And then we only have like 3 minutes left in this segment. I want to get to your toolbox and come back and get to the pragmatic part of this that your toolbox actually does there behind you. So Simplified, and then we'll go to a break and we'll come back and talk about the toolbox of how to be practical, implement these type things in business or life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the premise of Simplified was I decided to write that because I finally had a message and my voice on it, and a message that I wanted to share with the world. So I chose to write a book. I've been asked to write a book for a very long time, and until I didn't want to be another Me Too author. I wanted to know what my message and my voice was. So I had that, and I wrote that. And it's built on the premise that I believe people want three things in business, which is, and if you look at yourself in your own life, they want something to believe in, a sense of purpose or meaning to the work that they're doing. They want somebody who believes in them. That means a leader or a manager, what do you want to call them, that actually empowers them to make smart decisions through having values to say, here, make some great decisions. I believe in you. And then a leader that they can believe in. So someone to believe in who has a vision of the world that's far greater than all of us combined. And so I thought, like, if that's the premise of it, I said, well, if I could help leaders to understand how to create a culture or an organization that delivers on those three things, we could shift the consciousness of the planet. People would find a greater sense of meaning. There'd be less workplace harassment, stress, anxiety, bullying, all this sort of going on that people take home. And we have this diminishing lifestyle, rather if people felt real meaningful, because work's a part of who we are. It's how we contribute to the world. If I could have some meaning to that and do that in a place where I'm loved and feel that I can love, then I could take that home and we could increase and improve the consciousness of how people feel about the workplace. So that's why I wrote it. But then I wanted to do it in a way, as the pragmatic spiritualist that I am, with really simple tools, because I think most of what we call leadership today, Steve, it's just modern management practices, and we complicate things far too much. And I believe it was time to lead differently. So I wanted to show people in a simple step-by-step, do this, do this. Here's how you create the culture and strategy alignment. So you don't have to have a culture that needs strategy. Here's a simple way to do that, as we talked about. Here's why our business exists. Here's how we think about it. Here's the world we're creating, and here's the business we're building to do that. Here's how you take people on that journey. You form a narrative. Words form a narrative. Numbers tell the story. Do the numbers and like the story and the narrative match. And then here's how to lead them, and using the teams and how to lead teams and become coaches, not bosses, and all those wonderful things to bring those organizations to life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I and we've got about 1 minute left here, but I love that on so many levels. But in our lives, I have seen people that have gotten to successful businesses with lots of profit. They've made lots of money. They've had lots of success, and they get to that point of that void of, is this all there is? I thought this was going to feel different. I thought this was going to mean something different. And then they start searching. Oh, and now it's time to search for this purpose thing. Yeah. I also have other people that are so driven on their purpose and being of significance, and sometimes too immersed in that I've got to make a difference in the world, that they don't have that pragmatic step-by-step process to run an effective, profitable business that has good operations, good HR, good marketing, good lead generation, et cetera. So I love that you've pulled all that together as a pragmatic spiritualist. So for those that want to learn more about Dave and his pragmatic spiritualist, he has a toolbox that he has, and it's actually, you can't see him if you're on audio, but he's got this great board behind him that is his toolbox. It's got a bunch of great pyramids and circles and diagrams. So for anybody who's more analytical or pragmatic, come back and let's learn more from Dave on this. How do I get these step-by-step, either in my personal life, if I want more purpose and to feel more loved and more on purpose with what I am and who I am and why I'm making a difference, or if you're doing that within a company or within a department or within your job, whatever it might be. So come back and let's hear more from Mr. Dave Clare down under. Thanks, everybody. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business, where we are always talking about making wiser decisions, finding greater profits in your life and your business, and higher purpose. And as I said, as I introduced my guest, Mr. Dave Clare, can't think of many people better to talk about higher purpose than Dave Clare, who is this purpose-driven leader and consultant and advisor and author. But as we were talking about purpose and mission and making a difference in the world and all of this spiritual intelligence, EQ, IQ, SQ, before this last segment, we also talked about Dave is also a pragmatic spiritualist. And Dave likes to get into the step-by-step processes or systems, which I love as well, because most people want to know, okay, how does this work? Like, how would I make this work? Not everyone wants to know how the watch is made, but they for sure want to know how to tell time. So Dave, behind you, I've mentioned this in a couple of segments, you've got this really cool board behind you. And for those that can't see it, if you're just listening in, we'll again be putting some of these images in the show notes. But Dave has a really cool, big, huge whiteboard behind him that he's got some static images called a toolbox. So Dave, I think this is some of your core principles. Can we have you spend a little time? I'm going to turn the mic over to you as a teacher for a minute and see what you can take people through on some of these step-by-step processes here.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So very simply, I believe that all our organizations should become great, right? That we should have great organizations because our clients or our customers deserve greatness from us or our best from us. If you're going to do anything in the world, why not do it at the highest level, right? And to me, And that's a little bit of part of my own spiritual context. Is I think if I should be serving at my highest level, whatever it is today, and then striving for an even higher level. Because as good as I am today, I know I'm capable of becoming more. So when we look at that from a concept or principle point of view, so if our clients deserve our best or greatness from us, what in our organization is that actually drives greatness? And to me, it's people. So we want to actually look at, like, how do we help our people become great? And in order to understand that, then we need to understand human behavior and how people become who they are and how we can help them become the best that they can be. Because to me, leadership is all about helping other people become the best version of themselves to do their life's best work while in our care and beyond. And that means I care about you as a human being first, employee second. That means I don't have to have a position or title to demonstrate leadership. So if our organization wants to be great, we have to help our people be great. If leadership's all about helping people be great or be their best, well, it makes sense that we need to understand human behavior. And so one of the things we work with people on, one of our models, which is off to the side at the moment, is about human behavior. And very simply, human behavior is success, whatever you believe that to be for yourself, has come from your results. So I have accomplished these things in my life, which culminate in my picture of success, tangible and intangible. But those results have come from the way I've behaved. I've taken these actions to drive those results and give me that success. Now that behavior, what we know about human behavior is that how I think determines how I act. As a person thinketh, think and grow rich, I think therefore I am. And so if my attitudes and my habits of thinking are what drive those behaviors, give me the results and success, well, how did I get those attitudes? Well, they were conditioned into me through a process of spaced repetition of a bunch of inputs from parents, teachers, media, society, people's opinions I valued growing up. Repetitively, I've heard conditioned the way I think about things, causing me to behave, sort of think in a certain way, which causes me to behave the way I do, getting me the results of success I may or may not be enjoying in life. Now, the cool part about that process, and this is really important, is that most of us have got to where we are by default and circumstance, but the same process that helped us be who we are today is the same process we can use to help people become the best version of themselves for whatever it is tomorrow. And if we look at that then, and we look if that's human behavior, and if we took all those human beings and understood that process, and organizational behavior, should it be any different to human behavior if organizations are just a bunch of human beings all working together for a common goal? So what we want to do is develop a process for organizational behavior that followed human behavior. Because one of the things we find is in our organizational structures today, the way we think about organizations, is that, and let's put it into terms of technology. In the days when technology first came out, we had to take human beings and adapt them to technology. We wondered why we weren't utilizing the technology to its fullest capabilities, because we're trying to get people to shift the way they think about things in terms of it didn't flow with them. And we build organizations that don't flow with the way we feel as human beings either. But what if we actually created an organizational behavioral structure that followed human behavior? And then therefore we could not only help people be their best, but create an organization where they can bring their best self to work and express that through the work that they do. And so we created this process for human behavior that we can't see, but then we created one for organizational behavior, which is slightly off screen. But success to a human being is just the mission to the organization. That's what success is a fulfillment of the mission. And then our results for us as individuals, well, it's achieving our objectives and key results that show that we've achieved that mission. So when we work at who we need to become, we go, well, what are the objectives that we would accomplish to show we've become that? And the behaviors would drive those key results that we have. What are the actions we would take? And what drives how we act is how we think. So then our values go, well, our values are how we think around here. So then we're able to help people understand how to use values better in their organization to empower their people to make smart decisions. Because now we know how we think determines how we act. So we want to make sure, unlike Volkswagen, who had care and sustainability for the environment as their number 2 core value, and yet they allowed people in their organization to come up with ways to cheat on the emission test in vehicles. So it didn't fit with the values of the organization, but they allowed that to happen. But if we have actually values that we lead, live, and love every day, it should guide the right behaviors to drive the results and fulfill the mission of the organization. And then instead of conditioning, what we use is coaching. So we need to coach our people to coach the gap between the thinking they have and the thinking we want, which is the values of our organization. And how do we coach that gap? Because this is why we need to make sure we're coaching our team into greatness. Because we should be using coaching in our organization, because you just can't boss people and tell them, you can use incentive and fear, but if we're coaching them because they understand why we're doing it and what it means to them and how it impacts them in a human way, well, then people are more likely to lead, live, and love those values in your organization if you're helping them shift their thinking from the thing they have into that lens and move them forward, rather than telling them to think this way, telling them to do this thing. Because unless we reprogram the automatic pilot, it's not going to change permanently anyway. So we created those two models. And then this other diagram that you'll see here is when we layered human behavior and organizational behavior over the top of each other, we built what we call our business evolution roadmap. And that's what this tool is here.
Yeah. So for those that are seeing, you'll see what Dave's pointing. It's like a pyramid with a bunch of circles at the bottom. For those who are on audio, this will be in the show notes, but it's a very cool visual that you have there, because it really makes the ascending concept here, and then the foundation that you need with the circles at the bottom, which I'm assuming are taking these values and making that part of your foundation. Yeah,
absolutely. This is how you pull it all together, so you create a culture and strategy alignment. So if we know then that we, so we get down the bottom. So down the bottom it says purpose. So purpose is why we get out of bed every day. So if everyone knows why they get out of bed every day, and then on every occasion we're coaching them through the lens of the values, we're empowering them to make smarter decisions. Firstly, they have something to believe in as to why they come to work every day. Then secondly, what they have is they know that they have a leader that actually believes in them, that can empower them to make smarter decisions, and helping them coach the gap in terms of the thinking and more in alignment with the values of the organization, to drive their 90-day action plans, to achieve their objectives, to fulfill their 1-year operational plan, if whatever you want to call it in business, which will lead you to where you want to be in 3 years, which should be us becoming the organization in terms of our mission to start creating the world that we see as this vision that inspires us. So when we layer these two things over, what we now have is a purpose that will drive our business, a set of values that will guide us. We have a mission to evolve us and a vision that inspires us. We have a leader who has a picture of the world that's far greater than all of us combined, all right, that is so big that we can't accomplish it alone, and says, here's the business that we need to build. And there's a great quote that I'll share with you very quickly. Antoine Saint-Exupéry, it's my best French Canadian I can give you. He said, if you want to build a boat, don't gather the men and women to garnish the materials. Give them a yearning for the vast and endless sea, and they'll do whatever it takes to build the boat. I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Yeah, but that's good. Yeah.
So they're so excited about this future world that we're creating together. Well, then you go, well, what do you need me to do to help build this boat? So our mission is, what's the boat we need to build to start sailing out to that vast and endless sea? And then this is where everything, then if you reverse engineer, they go, well, what would we need to accomplish in 3 years? What do we need to do in the next 12 months? What do we need to do every 90 days? And you now have a process for your organization.
Right. And this leads into people's businesses, that they then overlay what those missions are for themselves. And then you're chunking those out, I'm assuming, into specific task, people's job descriptions, who's going to handle what, who's the stakeholder. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left in the segment. So let's finish. Let's have you go on that mission, finishing that up on those last 2 quick diagrams. And then we're going to talk about your upcoming book as well.
Yeah, I'll just do the one next diagram. But just to your point, Steve, this way we get people involved in the work, involved in decisions about the work. So they have a greater sense of ownership and participation when we have this, so that if we're only planning out every 90 days, then they get involved in how we're going to do this 90 days. So they have a sense of ownership of the work too. Then the last part then is other diagram over here, which is the circle of organizational leadership, which I created back in 2001, is how do we keep, when you took a look at organizational hierarchical charts, most of the power is held at the top of the organization. These are what I call ecosystems of leadership. So I'm the boss, you're my subordinate. All the power is at the top, but all the information is usually down the bottom in terms of what's happening on the ground. So power and information rarely coexist at the same table. Also, if there's somebody in one team on the bottom right-hand corner of that hierarchical chart who has an information for somebody at the top left, it's going to go up and down through all these channels to get there. And so we have this boss-subordinate system, which is why I call it an ecosystem of leadership. But what I want to do is create an ecosystem of leadership in the organization. So the circle of organizational leadership is designed this way. And once again, when we talk about human organizations, how are we made up, Steve? We're made up of cells, right? Human beings were made up, all these cells that all combine together to create this amazing, most complex organization in the world, the human being. But at the center of every cell is a common nucleus. So can you imagine if we had a table, a round table like King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, where at the center of that table set a common nucleus. Here's the purpose of our organization. And then every decision had to go, or every conversation went through the lens of our values to that client-centric purpose of our business. And every single person would do that. This way, we would have an organization that's structured where everybody answers to something first, not to someone. And where top-down leadership is a thing of the past, and all-around leadership will be the way forward. And this person here would be the coach of their team to achieve the objectives and the results through the lens of our values to our purpose. So all decisions are made, and when I talk about having a purpose-driven organization, all decisions are made from purpose first, because purpose is the seed of culture, and it's the number one decision-making filter in our business. Will it help us do this? Yes or no? Does it help us practically solve the problem we're here to do? Yes or no? And if it's a no, then why are we doing it? Or send it out and bring it back in a way where it will.
Well, there's so many
teams like that in an ecosystem. That is the best way to do it.
I love that. I mean, there's so many great quotes and we've got some amazing hashtags in there we're going to be putting out on this, but I love so much of that. But one of the ones popped out in my engineer Noel pointed out as well is the ecosystem versus the ecosystem. And I love that, since, I also talk a lot about ego versus Iggy, which we're going to come into the next segment about edging good out versus inviting good in or got in. This is perfect with that. But in this day and age, not only is the organization going to benefit so much better, and so are the customers from having this kind of concept. Millennials and younger people are demanding this. They have so many choices in workplaces. And if you're pursuing talent, that people in their 20s and mid 20s and early 30s, whatever it might be, they no longer just adhere. If you're my boss, you're my boss, and I'm going to do anything you say. They want to have purpose-driven environments. They want to have collective consciousness. So it's like it is already evolving in societal's desire and need. And for companies that are willing to lead in this and create from that versus having their arm twisted behind them back that they have to do it, will be so much ahead of the game. So I love that ecosystem versus ecosystem. And then also the answering to purpose first before someone. And that, there's so many companies that you can think of that just got off track with decisions that were made because they were so fearful of the power above them and an individual or the executive team, that they were not answering to. I mean, I think some of these quote people that we look at that have been like whistleblowers, as an example, in industries or in oil or in Facebook or wherever it might be, because they realize, look, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what you profess we would be part of. So if you have it in your company that's talked about all the time, when you're making decisions at the board table, at the employee table, at the collective table about, hey, how is this aligned with our mission? And it's aligning to answering to purpose before a person or someone. That is really how you get massive change. So I love that. So thank you for summing that up. Your book that you have coming out, I believe we've got it up here on the screen. We can pop, and we're going to jump another segment, but it's called You Can't Boss Someone into Greatness. So tell us how you came up with the title, and when does the book come out?
Yeah. So very quickly, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a big Jim Collins fan, and once again, it was that concept, like, if you want to take your organization from good to great, what in your organization needs to go from good to great? And they're in the human resources world, which is resources for humans, not humans as a resource. So they call themselves Big H, Little R organization. And I was speaking to Robin. He said, well, your people need to. And I said, well, great, but you can't boss someone into greatness. And that just sort of fell out of my mouth. And that's why pragmatic spiritualist, something from another plane, I was a conduit, and I just said that. And he goes, oh my God, that's amazing. And so I wrote that down. And it's something that I've been working with for a while with people in terms of how to become a coach, not a boss. And I said, well, that's the title of the book, because I want people to understand that you can't boss someone to greatness. We don't have head bosses, offensive bosses, defensive bosses, special teams bosses. We have head coaches and things like that. So that's what the book is. It's going to come out ideally, I believe, it towards the end of June or beginning of July. So
well, we won't be able to get our hands on that soon enough, because that's a great title, and I know it's going to have additional great content like this is in it. So everybody listen in. If you'd like to learn more about greatness personally, professionally, in businesses you are working within, business you're creating, or businesses you're running, come back and hear more from Dave Clare on getting into greatness, and learning also a little bit more about Dave on the personal side. We have a fun segment we're going to do on Instagram images. So you'll come back and learn about that on this next segment. So come back and join us on the Alchemy of Business. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. We will be right back. We'll be on Instantly Interesting Instagram. So stay tuned. Thank you for tuning back in to the Alchemy of Business Show here with Mr. Dave Clare. We've been talking about all things from purpose to people to having greatness in your life to overcoming from victim to victor. And we're going to jump into this last segment and have some additional fun here with Dave, because it's been fun along. And we were talking about his book, You Can't Boss Someone into Greatness, coming back out in June. That'll be in the show notes. So we'll make sure everyone gets a blast on that when it comes out. So congrats, Dave, on getting that done and following your own spiritual intelligence of having that title come through you. And it's always great when we follow our intuition, and it's in our psyche, and then our spirit and our heart, and then boom, it's on paper, and then it's on an image. And now I'm showing it from where I am in San Diego across whoever's going to watch this across the world. So it's so cool how to manifest things. You were talking about Think and Grow Rich. You commented that earlier, and I've got that over my shoulder on another bookcase that I'm in. But that's a true example of Think and Grow Rich. It's about, thinking something, writing it down, having goals and affirmations, turning it into a reality, using that energy for, so I love seeing that materialized. So we went through and scanned through a couple of your Instagram photos, and we have a segment that we do on the Alchemy of Business, and it is called Instantly Interesting Instagram.
You need to have a big instantly interesting Instagram.
I'm going to get a voiceover on that so that we have that booming voice. I'll have to have you do that because you have a really good radio voice. But Noel, my engineer, let's make note of that, of the booming voice for that segment. And here's the rules. They're simple. If you're not seeing this screen, anybody, we basically do this. We take a quick dive into the photos of the guest on Instagram, in this case, Dave Clare, on his feed. We then pull up some interesting ones we thought had some cool images without any context for the listeners. And then Dave will share and tell us more about what was happening in that photo. And we'll just do kind of a rapid fire. So for those that aren't seeing this, we're going to visually explain it to you. I am. And then it'll also be in the show notes if anyone wants to download them. But let's jump to the first one, Noel. Okay. This is Dave and a dog, which it looks as happy and content as Dave does. So tell us about this dog. What's the breed and what's the moment?
Well, that's the moment is I was visiting my daughter, who I don't get to see very often. So I was up in Geraldton, West Australia, where she still lives. And I've just woken up, actually, and I just sat down on the couch to have a coffee. And that's my grand fur baby, Sarge. So Sergeant, that's her dog. And he loves, I call myself his grandmaster. I don't want to be a granddad. I'm the grandmaster. And it drives my daughter nuts. But when I say, come see grandmaster, he jumps up on my lap. And then she just took a photo of like, oh, my God.
That's so funny. So wise. And what's the breed?
I don't know, but we call him Scooby-Doo because he looks just like a bit like Scooby-Doo.
He does look like Scooby-Doo. Actually,
and
that's a great name.
He has a collar with a tag and everything.
Oh,
and it's like,
I love it.
Woo-doo-doo-doo. Yeah, and so that's that photo. Yeah, it was an awesome photo.
All right, next one. Okay, this is Dave with some cool glasses, half his face, and a really cool convertible-looking car. Dave, tell us about this.
That's a convertible Bentley. It's about a $500,000 car. Actually, I love convertibles. I actually have a convertible I drive around in myself. I rode motorcycles for many years, and I feel claustrophobic in vehicles. And I was walking up to visit a buddy of mine in West Perth here, and walking past, and there was this Bentley with the top down, the $500,000 car, everything, just sitting there exposed.
Baby blue, yeah, just like happy as a large is, yeah.
Yeah, that was corporate color, so it's circle leadership blue, as we would call it. And so I took a picture of that and said, "Oh, look at the new Bentley. Send me $50 and I'll show you how to afford a Bentley like this." Because these people who sit on cars and say, "Hey, send me this money and I'll teach you how to get a car like I have." So a tongue-in-cheek joke at some of those people, but it just happened to be circle leadership blue. It's a convertible and it's a $500,000 car just sitting there on the street. And how safe is Perth where you could leave your car just sitting like that?
I love it. Those are beautiful cars. I mean, they are magnificent.
Stunning, yeah.
Okay, now we've got a Wishbone Thousand Island bottle of salad dressing, and the title is "Want Some Dressing for Your Word Salad." What is this?
Yes. So when we work with people about getting their purpose, values, vision, and mission completed in their organization, what we call the narrative of their business, we believe that you should be able to articulate simply and clearly the answer to those four things in 66 words or less. When I look at a lot of organizations, they have these verbose, like some value statements, even just for one value is like 30 or 40 words. And I said, to me, they're just word salads. And one of my buddies, Aiden Parker, he has one of the best quotes of all times. He said, "Dave, why I love your stuff is because you add value by removing things that don't." All right. Mm-hmm. And so I put that as a post of how many, when you look at your own purpose, values, vision statements, are they just a word salad?
Salad. Yeah, I love that.
Why you do what you do, how you uniquely think about it, the world you want to create, and the business you must become to create that, you should be able to articulate in 66 words or less. Because Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And who should understand it better than anybody else? So stop creating word salads for your business. Yeah,
I love that. It's the old explain it like you were explaining it to a kindergartner, or the KISS, keep it simple, stupid phrase. It's all boils back down to that. Yeah. Let's see. You've got some funny hats on here. I'm assuming. I think this is your. Is this your? Yeah, yes. I thought that was your wife. I know I've seen her on golf carts and different things before, but the hats were throwing me off. So this is Dave and his wife in a very funny photo with some very cool hats, and it says on his T-shirt Australia. So what was that? This was a day you were celebrating, I'm assuming.
Yes, we actually have a day in Australia. It's called Australia Day. It's kind of like Independence Day, but it's
kind of like our 4th of July in the U.S. Independence Day.
Yeah. So it was actually two Canadians. We're Canadian people. We're really proud Canadians, but we're also really thankful for the great country that Australia is, that we've called home now for the past 12, 13 years. And so we decided to get all done up. And so there's a photo of my wife and I. We went and bought all this Australia Day garb and put a photo up just to also to take a little bit of tease our Canadian friends. When it was minus 20 up there, it was like 38 degrees on Australia Day in Celsius, that is, not Fahrenheit. So it's probably like 100, 105 or something like that Fahrenheit. Of us out in our backyard with our pool. So we wanted just to say happy Australia Day to all our friends and family.
Well, happy Australia Day for sure to everybody down under, and happy for anyone who's listening from any part of the world. We're so glad you're listening in. Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes or so left with Mr. Dave Clare, and I want to jump into the segments. There's no problem talking with Dave about spirituality because he's already been talking about that since the very beginning. Some of our guests, we don't get to the Iggy moments until the very end, and that's with the first time we actually start bringing up spirituality at the depth you did. So I love you're already incorporating that in your when you talked about setting your goals or within companies, it is have to be about the money you make, your health, your family, your relationship, your spirituality, your dreams, your desires. It's all one big ecosystem. And, I came up with this concept of Iggy, IGI, and my book was called The Iggy Principles. And Wayne Dyer, who's just been an amazing mentor for many thousands and millions of people around the world before his passing, with his work. He was a great writer and a great spiritual writer, but he coined a lot of the mainstream stuff on the word ego, edging God out or edging goodness out. So for me, I had to pull this back in and say, God, that just hit me and struck me, 15 years ago or so when I read that. And so I came up for myself, this reverse, inviting good in, Iggy principles. So that is the power of prayer, of the gratitude, like what I call 4 B's, forgiveness, integrity, service. But it can be each person's own description. So Dave, in your own Iggy or your own pragmatic spirituals, how do you actually define what spirituality is? I know pragmatic spiritualist, but the word spirituality for you, how do you define spirituality, and how do you incorporate spirituality into your daily life or practice? Beyond some of the things you were talking about, it can be the work environment or the personal. What is that spirituality to you?
Well, spirituality to me is deep within inside me. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. So, for me, I believe that if there is a God, then I am God, and it's inside me, right? And so for me, that there's a greater power or a greater purpose that I can tap into that will guide me to make the smartest decisions. No different for me. Like when I started looking at what is, I might have resisted for a long time this stuff, but then when I decided to go in, it was quite amazing when I let go of everything out and went in and just listened to myself and quiet and, like what I call my own version of meditation and all that sort of stuff. I started learning more about who I was as a person and who I wanted to be in the world today and who I wanted to become. And to me, that whole concept or process is spirituality to me. It's letting go of all the other stuff and just listening to my soul speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And so I get rid of all the logic brain of my head and let go of that and everything and just let my soul speak and listen to it. That is my essence of spirituality.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you're saying God is with me, and letting go of all the noise. And you were talking about that earlier about even on your word salad, getting rid of stuff that's not necessary and getting down to the essence of it. So I love that. Yeah, for me, I mean, my definition is in a similar way of, I just believe God is the sum of all that is, meaning that this energy of this universal stuff that I don't completely understand by any stretch, but I know it's way smarter in the intelligence of it than I am. And when I do tap into it with my own Wi-Fi through meditation or prayer, whatever it might be, I know that I'm more tuned into blocking out or carving away that salad that's not needed, so that I'm getting to the simplistic of it. So when you've done that, and when you're in that zone of your own spiritual connection, what I call Iggy moments, aha moments have been around for a long time. Oprah used to talk about what was your aha moment. So for your Iggy moment, what are some points in your personal or professional life that in recent memory that you can think of that were this significant of where your spirituality of this knowing came to be, that it was so obvious in the static or the electricity and what it might have been, that it was so obvious to you that was some of your Iggy moments?
Okay, and I'll finish on this one very quickly. Firstly, when I think about, there's no magical mystical being outside of me. The magical mystical being is inside me. All right, and so that's when I could tap into that. So there was a moment back in October 1999 in Barrie, Ontario, Canada, 157 Bayfield Street, in a basement apartment. I was sitting on the floor in this basement apartment under a tanning salon, sitting up against my son's bed. He was 3 years old, looking across at my daughter, who was probably about 6 months old, 8 months old at the time. And I virtually lost everything. I was trying to start my new business. I'd lost everything. And I was sitting there crying my eyes out thinking, I'm going to have to quit, go get a job and do everything. And this is where, like, when I really started to realize there's something greater inside of me, or there's a voice, right? That voice came up from inside me and it said, Dave, if you quit, what are you teaching your children that when things get tough, that all you have to do is quit? And it was, well, like, why are you not, I need to become more instead of staying who I was. And this is where really evolution really started to come to me, and all this sort of stuff was like, if I keep staying who I am, trying to be more of who I am for more people, well, that's not enough. I'm resting on my laurels. I need to become more. And so I needed to go in and say, hang on. And that's where I went back into where that voice is and started writing out. And that's how I drafted out. Actually, the next morning I wrote out my whole relaxed selling process and everything, all these things some of the tools that I started to develop for myself all came from that moment when that voice came out of me from inside and said, Dave, but what are you teaching your kids?
Yeah, I love that. Well, and many times it is somebody that we love so much that we realize our pain trying to create a better thing for them, i.e. this case, your children who became part of you. Obviously you made them and you created them, but I love that caused you to propel. It wasn't that you were necessarily doing it for Dave, even though you were doing it for someone else, but then you were doing it for yourself. And now you've gone out and created this for the world. So that spiritual moment of that, sometimes it's the breakdown that creates the breakthrough. So it's so great that you didn't quit, and that spiritual essence, so when you hear that voice now, many, many years later, is it a feeling? Is it a voice? Is it an instinct? How now did you start listening for that voice or that thing more?
Yeah. So now, once again, this is where then over the years, as I started to realize, like, hey, there's something there, and I started listening it to more, I really dove into spirituality, and I started understanding more about spirit and how do I tap into that, and meditating and closing my eyes and just allowing quietness and then seeing a light through me, and some practices like that I could see. And you know what, I was, let's call it, terrible at it for a long time, right? Because it would just be kind of ad hoc or when I felt
right.
And I realized that when the things were tough, that's when I would go to it. But then nowadays I realize, well, actually it gets tough because I stopped doing it, right? If I just keep doing it, I can process and understand and move. It doesn't mean I don't have challenges thrown at me. Right. But instead of using it when I need it in my mind, I actually use it all the time now. So I have a mantra I read every day. I have a quiet period of the day where I just let my mind relax and wander. I do these things on a regular and consistent basis now because I know the value of doing it all the time, not just when things were crap.
Yeah, I love that. Well, do it. And I wish we had more hours with you here, Dave, but we don't. So I love that all the shares that you had today. And for those that want to learn more from Dave, you can go to daveclare.com. If you're seeing the screen, it's scrolling across the bottom, and that's CLARE, daveclare.com. You can reach him on his LinkedIn, his Instagram. We're going to have those in the show notes. If you're not seeing this and you're on audio, no fret. Again, jot down daveclare.com or just check out the show notes. And learn more about what Dave does. But I've been really, really thrilled again, always connecting with you, Dave. I knew when we first met, we had this across the world relationship of friendship, and we don't talk near as much as we should or want, but we do because of social media, and your mission of what you're doing is very parallel. So I always feel like I'm right there in your back pocket with you, cheering you on, because your work is so great. And I just applaud you on connecting this purpose and spirituality and practicality, and you're being a pragmatic spiritualist, but also having your toolboxes to help others figure out how to do this. So thanks for being on the show. Any closing words for the guest?
For the guest or from the guest? Yes, from the guest, sure.
For them, yeah.
Anyone listening to this, please. Steve's first book, From Lead to Gold, is a ripper. It's an absolute it's like a masterpiece. I loved it. I read that a couple of times. I'm like, this is such a great book. Iggy, I've read through as well. What an insightful piece of work that you've done. And once again, you channeled. So I would encourage people to definitely get your books for me. But last but not least, yes, I would like to give a gift. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Please.
We have a business evolution roadmap, which is kind of the pragmatic component of all the spiritual context of this that I'll send you. You can put it in the show notes and anyone can download it. It's, when we talk about a business, Steve, let's get everyone on the same page. Well, this is the same page. It allows you to get your culture and strategy in total alignment. And I'll give you the blank template that people can have as a gift.
Oh, well, thank you for that gift. I know we will definitely put that in the show notes. Thank you for that gift. And thank you for everyone listening today on to the Alchemy of Business Show, where we are always looking for making wiser decisions, creating greater profits, and finding higher purpose. And boy, did Dave Clare deliver on all that today. So thanks again, Dave. Thanks for all of you that listened in or watch. We appreciate it. And stay tuned for future shows. We will be back again. Thank you, everyone.
And that concludes this episode of The Alchemy of Business with your host, Steve Rodgers. If you found value in today's broadcast, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing with friends, and leaving a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next Thursday for another episode. Be blessed and see you soon.